I've loved certain things. Now, the same things that have brought me joy and peace, I can't even stand to look at them, to think of them. Forgive me if my flow is staggered, but a lot has happened over the past 24 hours, and I'm still in the process of collecting my thoughts, and much more my words. I'm a warden for one of Kenya's larger game reserves, whose name will be withheld for obvious legal and professional reasons. As a Briton, I've been in the country for the past year, shuffling between administrative duty to field work with some of the more experienced guys. I enjoy the fresh air, strong breeze, and open plains, and above all, the animals. Mention wildlife reserve to the average person, and it conjures up the images of snarling big cats or charging rhinos. But not to me. In the time I've been here, the most danger I faced was skinning my all-too-pale knees on the bark of a tree when I tried to install a trail camera. Not that I was afraid of the animals. Growing up in Kent, Attenborough documentaries was the closest thing I could get to the African savannas, and I simply could not get enough. Between my father's drinking and my mum leaving the family, I found peace in the rolling plains of the Serengeti and the peaks of Kilimanjaro. Where people would tremble at the sights of lions and leopards, I was in awe. As corny as it might sound, I used to imagine they were my friends. After all, there weren't many I could turn to. I loved all the creatures. At least, until last night. For the 12 months I've been working here, all my duties and errands never required me to remain on the reserve after dark. I never thought much of it. I mean, I usually began work around 7 a.m, making routine patrols, doing the occasional site visit, head counts of animals together with rudimentary research for any visiting academics, so it made sense I would sign out well before sunset. Yesterday was different, however. Kamanje, my supervisor, advised I come in for the late shift. "It's not something we normally do," he said. I could hear the unease in his voice. Kamanje was an aging bureaucrat, stuck in an underfunded, understaffed job, with few perks and even fewer reasons to stick around. His dull, monotone voice had something else that morning. It was a tremble. "A few of the regulars on the night shift will be here by 6 p.m. to guide you. After that, you're on your own, but it's pretty dull until morning relief arrives." I agreed, but the sound of Kamanje's voice stuck with me, even after hanging up. Maybe I imagined it. I had never met any of the night shift staff. They were supposedly the ones at most danger, not particularly from the animals, but more from other people. Poachers were the biggest problem around here. Back in 2016, when I was trying to stake a claim in East Africa, I heard of a few run-ins with a convoy of militants who tried to set up a supply line to the northeast of the reserve, but the last few years have been more or less quiet. For those reasons, and more, we tried to keep a roster of at least 10 men on the night shift, with an additional 5 on standby. But budget cuts together with the pandemic has forced us to do more with less, meaning make the most of 5 guys. I packed what I thought I would need, including an expensive night vision camera I thought I would never get to use. I felt a creeping dread about taking up the night shift. Poachers and terrorists aside, I felt as if I wasn't being told a lot of what I was getting into, and that made me ask questions I realized I never asked before. Most notably, how come I never saw any of the night shift, since I was the first one on the reserve for the morning shift? I pushed these things to the back of my mind to stay focused on the task at hand. Even though I didn't necessarily have a fear of the animals, it was a line of work that demanded focus at all times. Even more so after dark, I imagine. I got to the reserve just as the sun dipped below the horizon. There I met a grizzled-looking man, decked in green safari fatigues, who introduced himself as Anthony. Wrinkles spread across his face like a map of Kenya. He gave me a firm handshake and introduced me to Lemwani and Sironka. This was the night shift. They seemed a little bit more rougher than the usual day staff. A few times while speaking with the guys, I noticed Anthony looking at me, almost studying me out of the corner of his eyes. I thought it was strange, and then realized that being new to the job, he was probably skeptical about having me on as a supervisor. I tried not to think much of it. I was a new face after all, and wasn't exactly sure of what lay ahead, but tried to approach it with the same professionalism as I always did. How wrong I was. Anthony explained that, unlike daytime duties, I would spend a lot more time driving around the trails of the reserve with the other guys in a jeep. Only Sironka would stay behind at our outpost. The purpose of this, he said, was to ensure the animals were as he said, in good order. This confused me a bit. Usually the animals managed well without our help. This was, after all, their home, and there were enough heads and packs around to ensure they looked out for each other. Anthony must have seen the confused look before explaining. Just look at them. Nothing more. Don't get close. Even with the advice, I saw a look of concern wash over his face. It was the look of someone realizing that they got the wrong man for the job. By 9 p.m, we drove to the southernmost position of the reserve. Anthony turned off the lights and killed the engine of the jeep. There, we sat in darkness and silence for almost 3 minutes before I tried to crack a joke to break the tension. Quiet, he instructed. No sooner had he said that I heard it. About 100, maybe 140 meters away, was the sound of something. A shrill cry that seemed to rattle the hood of our jeep. I almost leapt out of the seat before I felt a strong palm grip my wrist. Relax, Anthony said, in the same voice as he would say good evening. Shortly after, I heard a cry of zebras. Only, they didn't sound quite right. It's difficult to explain, but it almost sounded like something pretending to be a zebra. Anthony muttered something to Lemwani, who was in the back seat. I heard him radio back to Sironka at the outpost. We're heading over to the source of the sound, he said, as he turned the keys in the jeep as the engine roared to life. I still wasn't sure what I was supposed to be doing out here, as Lemwani handed us headlamps as we drove towards the strange sounds. We stopped and killed the lights and engine of the jeep before venturing through a narrow dirt track lined with dry shrubs. Have you ever used a gun before? Anthony asked. I struggled to answer it. My work never required it. I mean, I was a field researcher after all. Forget it. Just stay close to us, he coldly instructed. After about 5 minutes of walking, we came to a clearing, and that is where I saw them. A herd of zebras, only not quite. Between the darkness and poor vision of the night, my brain hurt trying to make sense of what I saw before me. Zebras, or what looked like zebras. They looked corrupted. I saw a zebra with a pair of human eyes and a mouth that seemed too big for any animal. His lips peeled back into an unnatural grin. His eyes, I felt his gaze settle on me, and a cold, hot burning on me. There were others. Another zebra's mouth opened up, not on his head, where it should be, but beneath his neck. His head hanging limply behind, like some abominable Pez dispenser. A headless zebra strutted along calmly, as another one walked upright on 2 legs like a human. I felt a chill seeing this. My dinner churned in my stomach seeing this, and hearing their laughs and noises. Suddenly, Anthony's voice shook me. Don't take your eyes off us, he scolded, but before I could obey, I heard a noise behind me. I whipped around to see what it was, only to find nothing. In the time it took me to do that, Anthony and Lemwani were gone. It was impossible. They were an arm's length away from me, and I only had turned around for a second, maybe even less, yet they were nowhere to be seen. I saw the things strutting towards me and ran, the flow of my headlight barely lighting the way across dirt and rocks as I ran across the savannah. What the fuck did I get myself into? I tried to retrace my steps back to the Jeep, but it was no use. Between the running and the darkness, I was perfectly lost. My legs were burning, my chest hurt. What were those things? I felt like I was being punished. I felt for my radio, only to realize that it had fell out. I avoided the trees, knowing that's where the leopards on the plains took their rest, and I didn't want to replace one problem with another. I ducked behind a nearby shrub, hoping to wait out what I saw. After a short while, I heard my name. I knew Saronka would have come to check on us. I was about to climb out of the shrubs when something seemed off. I wasn't being called by the name I introduced myself to Saronka and the other guys. I was being called by my other name, my real name. Then I realized the voice calling me didn't sound like Saronka's. In fact, it didn't even sound Kenyan. It sounded British, and I knew whose voice it belonged to. Only the owner of the voice has been dead for years and buried in a British cemetery. It slurred with the sound of a man who had one too many scotch on the rocks, all while I hid from it in the bushes of a Kenyan savannah, the same way I hid from him when I was a child under my bed. A giraffe, only it wasn't really a giraffe. Its neck was much longer, and it was missing both of its eyes. It was calling my name in the cold of night. I felt a shudder quake across my body as this unnatural abomination trotted mere feet from me, calling my name. I must have fell asleep in the bushes because, when I woke up, the sun's rays were beginning to creep from over the horizon. I'd never felt such relief before in my life. In the distance, I saw the Jeep and made a run for it, but by that time the few animals I did glimpse seemed to be normal. I didn't take any chances as I punched the gas back to the outpost, where I was prepared to give a proper scolding to Saronka for not following the proper SOPs when it came to missing staff. Only, no one was there. No Saronka, and certainly no Anthony or Lemwani. I dialed Komanje immediately, and he, along with a few other senior officials, visited the area within the hour. We alerted the proper authorities, and I gave my statements to everyone who asked. I haven't been given the full picture as of yet. To be honest, I don't even know if I want the full picture on what happened that night. Those animals, whatever they are, they were corrupted. Or worse yet, that's what they always were when the lights went out.
Hello listeners, if you enjoyed this story, please check out the author in the description. For more content, leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more sinister readings.